So I wanted to mention something before we get going on the video, and that is that I've been shooting my videos up to this point with my iPhone, the iPhone 12, and it's been doing a nice job. But the other day I was talking to my grandson, and we were discussing the videos. He watches them. He said, "Hey, Grandpa, I've got something for you." And I'm like, What's that?" And he said, "Let me just show you." So he brought this out, and let me show you what he gave me. It's kind of jumpy here. My tripod for this iPhone is not the best. A Canon M50. Amazing. And I said, "I can't take that." And he goes, "Yeah, I want you to have it because it's just sitting around and I'm not using it." So I'm going to have a little bit of a learning curve using this camera. And so part of this video that I'm shooting right now is going to be on my iPhone, as well as some new footage from the M50. So bear with me if you see something that isn't quite right. It's kind of a learning curve, but I'm going to enjoy using it. And I want to thank Clay for giving me this, and appreciate it a lot. So on with the video. So to start with, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a tour of the station, show you what I use. The ICOM 7300 is my main radio, and that's been a really good radio. I got mine when they first came out, and I paid about $1,500 for mine. You can get them for around $1,000 now if you shop around a little bit. But anyway, that's the main radio for my station. I do have the old ICOM 725 down here, and I use that as a secondary radio. Over here is the power meter and SWR meter for the main rig. Under that is a tuner, which I really don't use much. It's for my attic antenna, which I don't use a bunch, other than when it's lightning out, I'll listen on that antenna. And then down under that is the Ameritron AL811. Now this one is the 3-tube model and doesn't really put out as much as the 4-tuber, but plenty of power for me. I talk all over the world with that amount of power. It's about 400 watts, 400 or 500 is what I run on that. And then over here I have a ICOM 2-meter rig, which I use for local. And under that is a meter that monitors my power from my 2-meter, and also the SWR for that antenna. But that's the basic setup. I also use a boom arm because I like hands-free, and I use the ICOM, I'm sorry, not ICOM, I use the Heil ICM mic, which is a great matchup for the ICOM 7300. The hand mic that comes with it really sounds great as well, but I didn't want to have to hold it in my hand. So this is the setup here on this boom arm, and then it has a foot pedal on the floor that interfaces with that, and that way you can write whatever and use the pedal to key the system. So that's the basic setup on the station, and I'll kind of walk through how it's all interfaced with each other, and then we'll go out and look at the antenna, which is basically just a 43-foot wire inside of a fiberglass tube, and that's strapped to the side of my shed out there, a wooden shed. But I get great signal reports from everybody, and talk all over the world with it. And a lot of people were asking, how do you get so much of a signal out of that meager setup? Because the footprint is really small, and the only thing you got sticking in the air is like a whip antenna. So anyway, it works really great, and we'll kind of talk through it and maybe even try to make some contacts with somebody. And then I also recorded some of the foreign stations that I talked to during the contest. So it'll give you kind of an idea the different areas that I can reach with that antenna. Anyway, we'll go from here. I wanted to show you guys how I set up my radio to tune my antenna. First thing I do is check my output power, and then you push in on this knob here on the ICOM 7300 brings up a menu, and the top of the menu is the RF power output. It's about 60 watts, 60% is the way it reads. And then the other thing I do is set it up so that it has a straight signal going out all the time, instead of like on sideband you would have to be whistling into the mic the whole time or whatever. But what I chose to use is a radio teletype, which is down here, the RIDI. And so I select that. And then when I'm ready to tune the antenna, what I do is I come over here to just below power, there's a button here that's transmit, and that's what I use to key the transmitter. So I'll push on that, and that brings up the transmit out, which you can see right here. It's a transmit. So that's the setup on the radio, and now I'll show you the meter and how that looks when it's adjusting itself and gets me a nice close to 1-to-1 match. Let's look at the meter that I use. I'm using the MFJ 891 meter. I like the meter because it's got nice big scale here. It's a combination of power scale over here, monitoring your power, and then it's got a scale over here to show your SWR, your standing wave ratio. So you can monitor both at the same time. Pretty handy. And then it also has different ranges. You can set it at 20 watts, 200 watts, or 2,000 watts. In this case, we're setting it on the 200 watt scale because we're only using 60 watts at the moment. It's coming out of my ICOM 7300, and then it's going through my linear, but my linear is in standby, and so it's coming straight to the meter with 60 watts. So anyway, I was down on the 40 meter band, and I had the antenna tuned for that. Now I'm back up on 20 meters. So I'm going to kick the transmitter on, and let's watch it tune. I'm going to kick it on right now, so you can see it doing its thing, and it tuned itself for the 20 meter band. Here's the power scale here, about 60 watts power. And then the SWR, standing wave ratio, is way down here, almost perfect 1-to-1 match. So it's really handy in tuning the antenna. You know, you kick it on, you watch the meter. When it reaches the scale of 1-to-1, you know you're tuned. And it's just that simple. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I tune my Ameritron AL811 linear, and it's pretty simple. So I'm going to do that next. So I've got my antenna tuned up, and now I've kicked on my linear. I'm letting it warm up, and I'm on the 20 meter band, so I'm switched over to that. And I got a chart with my linear that is pretty handy. This gives you an idea of where to start. Like right here, we're on the 20 meter band, so it's 14 megahertz. So the load needs to be on 4.5, and the plate needs to be on 8.5 to begin with. So it's a pretty handy chart. I use it all the time, and it seems to be pretty darn accurate. Because my linear is actually seeing a 1-to-1 match practically all the time on my antenna, because I tune my antenna first, then I turn on my linear and adjust that. So we're going to do that next. Stand by. So I wanted to show you guys the basic controls on my linear, and this is just a diagram of the face of the linear, and that's what came in my owner's manual. But basically you've got, you know, your on-off switch, the standby operate switch, and then this switch in one position shows high voltage, which would show up over here, usually about 1800 volts or so. In the other position it would show the current, and this meter would show the plate current, and this meter over here would show the grid current. So when you're tuning, obviously you would use these two controls here, and one of them being the plate control, and the other one being the load control. So when you key up your transmitter, the basic settings for 20 meters was 4.5 on this side and about 8.5 on this side here. That gets you in the ballpark real close to being resonant to your antenna. So we will attempt to do that and see if we can get it tuned up to around 400 or 500 watts. So we got the antenna tuned up, and now turned the linear on, got it warmed up, and going to set the basic settings for the controls that the owner's manual suggested, which are usually pretty darn close. The load control over here is set for 4.5. The plate control, I have it set for 8.5, and that's what the manual called for. We're going to keep an eye on these 2 meters here as we tune. The plate current shouldn't exceed 450 is what they're recommending in the manual, and then also the grid current should not exceed 100 milliamps as well. So we're going to be tuning. I usually start with the load control here, and I work back and forth. I set the load control for the maximum output, power output, and then I set the plate control for maximum output, and I just keep working back and forth until I've reached a point where it's not going to increase anymore and we've reached our maximum power output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the camera out. We're going to look at the power SWR meter going as we tune this. So I'm going to set that up right now. The linear controls are set, and we're ready to apply some power to the linear. And we'll keep an eye on the power meter here as we tune up. I made sure the frequency that we're operating on is clear, so I won't be interfering with anyone. But we'll key down. I'll adjust the load control first. So let's keep an eye on that and see if I can get this thing tuned up to about 400 or 500 watts. So here we go. So here's the load control, and I kind of rock it back and forth and try to get the maximum out of that. I let up on the key for a minute, and then we'll go to the plate control and max it out. See how that meter is kind of maxing out right there, and you just kind of rock the control back and forth to see which way the meter is going to go. Now we're going back to the load again. Here's the load control. And so we're rocking that back and forth. There's the max on the load. Now we're going to go back to plate again. There's the plate control. Okay, we got a little more. And we'll go back to load again. And it looks like we're probably kind of maxing out right there. Let's see. Let me go back to plate again real quick. So that's about it right there, and we're putting out about 400, 450 watts right there. So that's the basic setup on tuning up the linear, and you'd be surprised with 400 or 500 watts what you can do, especially if there's good propagation coming in. And I've worked, as far as Africa and all over Europe. It's pretty amazing. But anyway, that's the setup on the linear and getting it tuned up. I'm going to switch the camera back down to the linear, and we'll take a look at the grid current and plate current and see if they're within specs. I switched the camera back down to the linear so we can take a look at its meters. The plate current side is over here and the grid current over here. Now plate current, they suggest that you stay under 450 milliamps, and on the grid side they suggest under 100. So we'll kick it on, see what we can do here. So yeah, the plate side we're well under 450 milliamps, and over here we're well under 100 milliamps on the grid current. So we're in good shape there. And checking the power meter, we're at 450 watts out right now with a dead key. So pretty good. And you know, it's amazing. With 60 watts drive from my ICOM, I'm getting 450 watts out. And with that amount of power, it's amazing. You can work all over the world, literally. If the skip is in from Europe or from Africa even, I've worked Africa a number of times. With 450 watts, you can definitely go around the world. So anyway, we're going to take a look out in the shed next. I'm waiting for the weather to get a little nicer. But we'll take a look at the SGC 235 antenna coupler that I use out there and show you that setup. We're in the shed right now, and you can see the conduit that I ran underground from the basement to the shed. It pokes through right there where that white wire is coming out, and also my coax comes out of there as well. I used the LMR 400 coax, and it's been really good coax so far. It's been fantastic as far as SWR and all that. Above that is where the white wire goes into a box, and that's carrying the 12 volts for my antenna tuner coupler. And then the gray wire that's on the bottom of the box there, that runs over to the antenna tuner coupler. I made a loop with the coax and so forth, and then it runs over here to the antenna coupler. That's the SGC 235 antenna coupler. The white connector on the top of that, that's the wire that's going through the wall to the antenna. You can see there that where it goes through the wall. And then underneath that is where the ground is, and I have ground strap that goes through the bottom of the SGC 235 where you connect onto the ground, and it goes out through the wall, and then that's where it's connecting up to my ground box that's in the ground out there where all the radials connect. I also drove a 8-foot rod in the ground right below the antenna. I grounded everything to that as well. So that's the setup here in the inside of the shed, and so far so good. It's been a pretty good setup. So here's the setup on the outside of the shed, and you can see the conduit there going into the shed. One of those is the electrical power, and then the other one is the conduit that carries the coaxial cable and the DC wire to power up the SGC 235 antenna coupler. And then over there, right by the antenna, is a box I put on the outside wall of the shed that carries the wire through the wall. And then the mount for the antenna is right here, and you can see my wife made it nice and pretty. It basically has rocks around it and a flower bed looking thing, but I'm going to unbury that and show you guys what the wires look like down in there in a minute. But basically this just goes up to the top of the shed and has a clamp up there that clamps it to the peak of the shed. That helps support it. And then it just goes up 43 foot. There's basically just a 14 gauge wire inside of that fiberglass tube there. But the base of the antenna is mounted onto a fence post that I pounded into the ground. It's about 4 feet down that connects to, and it's just a metal fence post. And then the bottom of that thing also has an 8-foot ground rod pounded into the ground, and then I use all my grounding and everything to that. I'm going to unbury the rocks so that you guys can see the setup on the radials. It's a pretty cool setup, and I'll do that in a minute, but I wanted to show you this box. I'm going to cut away just for a second. So basically that box that's on the wall just protects the connection of the wire coming out there, and then that wire just comes around to the antenna. I'm going to try and show you that without bumping the camera. Might not be easy. But anyway, basically in the box is just a connector. It's a standard PL259 antenna connector. And I just put a mount inside that box. And it's just a standard PL259 connector. So anyway, I'm going to disconnect that during storms and whatnot. So it really makes it easy to protect yourself against the lightning. I just kind of ground that into the ground. This is the Tupperware box that I used to put the grounding system in. That way it's protected against the rain and the weather and everything. And it's somewhat waterproof, but not perfectly. But anyway, that's the setup there. I'm going to continue to open the box, and then you can see the grounding system that I used on the inside. There you can see the grounding system. And basically what I did, I took 3 ground bars that you can normally get at Home Depot for putting in your circuit breaker box, and I hooked them together. And from that ground system, it grounds it to the 8-foot rod that's in the ground, and then the multiple radials are connected to that, and they run out to the side of the yards. It basically just makes a picture frame around the backyard, around the edge of the yard. So it's not symmetrical like a lot of antennas should be, but this one seems to work well even without that symmetrical star-shaped grounding system. On the left there by the antenna coming down into the ground is the clamp that clamps it to that fence post, and I can ground to that. When I disconnect the wire when lightning's coming in, I just set it near that, and then that would ground it so the lightning wouldn't come into the house that way. So anyway, that's the setup, and now I'm going to bury everything back up and make it pretty again. I realize there's a lot of redundancy on this video, and the reason for that was, of course, you know, I shot some of it on my iPhone and some on the camera, so some of the scenes overlap kind of in information, but I appreciate you bearing with me on that. The next video is going to be better. It's all going to be shot on the M50, and the next video is also going to be on the screwdriver antenna that I designed with the unique radials. I think you guys will enjoy that. I'm kind of waiting for the weather to get better for that. I tagged on a few contacts that I made during the contest. I put the call letters across the screen along with the location, just to kind of show what the system will do. Anyway, thanks so much for watching the video. Please give me a thumbs up, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks.
1 kilowatt. Good luck.
Thank you, 73. Good evening. Good luck.
Something 3. Charlie, Quebec. Needs Quebec.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey, 59 kilowatt.
You're 59 Columbus, Ohio. Thank you. Have a good day.
To you too, sir. Charlie, Queen 8, Queen.
Copy. Kilo 1, Bravo, Zulu, Mike.
Kilo 1, Bravo, Zulu, Mike, 59 kilowatts.
Roger, 59, Mike Alpha.
Thank you. Papa Japan 4 Golf.
Alpha Alpha 4 radio, Alpha Alpha 4 radio.
Alpha Alpha 4 radio, 59 kilowatts.
Roger, good. Alpha, I'm in North Carolina, November Charlie.
Thanks. Papa Juliet 4 Golf.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey, 59 kilowatts.
Yeah, you're 59 Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for the contest.
Ohio, thank you. Papa Japan 4 Golf.
Tango Oscar, 7 Oscar, contest.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey.
Delta Whiskey?
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey. You are number 500559.
Okay, Whiskey, Echo Delta Whiskey, you're 59687, 687, over.
Roger. Good luck.
Thank you, you are set.
Echo India.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey.
Whiskey 8 again.
Whiskey 8, Echo Delta Whiskey.
Whiskey 8 Echo Delta Whiskey, you're 59601.
You're 59, number 004. Roger.
Copy. Copy 004, thank you. This is Victor 26 Echo India.